Good afternoon, everybody. I am excited and honored to be with you on this webinar that talks about biology of aging and how different pathways are important in the well-being of physical and cognitive functions of older adults. My name is Peter Abadir. I am a clinician scientist. I'm a geriatrician, and I'm also one of the PIs of the Johns Hopkins Artificial Intelligence and Technology Collaboratory for Aging Research. And I want to start my presentation today with a quote from Sir William Osler, who was one of the founding fathers of Hopkins medicine. He was a visionary physician that back in the day said it's much more important to know what sort of a patient has a disease than what sort of a disease a patient has. This quote cannot be said in any better way in older adults, that it is much more important to know your patients and that there are things that matter most to a patient that are much more important to know than to know the disease itself that the patient ended up having. So with that, I'll start my talk today. Today we will talk about the specific system, but I'm not going to go deeply into the biology of the angiotensin system and mitochondria, but more use it to highlight what matters most to older adults. First, I wanted also to share with you this slide about prevalence of older adults and diseases that's increasing in a very fast rate, and at the same time that we have much less scientists going into the aging world and applying for the R1s, the large grants that to examine aging. So putting those together, then you have a recipe for a problem that's going to happen as as we go. Currently, there are an estimated 1.07 geriatricians exist for every 10,000 older adults. And I am using this slide just to say that there is something that requires special training in taking care of older adults. And it's not like we say in pediatrics. Kids are not shrunken adults. You cannot just use the same medicines and give it to younger kids. Similarly, older adults have their own areas that you should be careful, medications that you should avoid, medications that you should not start at all. There are certain things that limit their access to technology and make one or other technology less useful to them, which will become relevant in my next few slides. So I'm a geriatrician, I'm a clinician scientist. I work in frailty, and I'll give you a little bit of details what frailty is. I'm one of the co-PIs of the Johns Hopkins Artificial Intelligence and Technology Collaboratory for Aging Research, and I direct the molecular core of the Older American Independence Center. And I'll tell you a little bit more about the Gerotech Incubators program later on in my presentation. I want to also, for the audience that are not from the Hopkins Bayview, I want to a little bit tell you about where I work and why it makes it a perfect place to develop new technologies for older adults and to have access to older adults population. So the Johns Hopkins Bayview Medical Center was initially started as an aging campus that we wanted to bring all geriatrics and geriatrics related specialties to be on one campus. And if you look at the map of the Bayview campus, you can see all the clinical specialties and subspecialties that are related to taking care of older adults, including the program for all-inclusive for elderly, the Memory and Alzheimer Treatment Center, the Older American Independence Center, Division of Geriatrics Medicine, Geriatrics Education, Center for Transformative Geriatrics. And to top it, you see also on the upper corner the National Institute of Aging that came and became part of the Hopkins Bayview as a way to build a campus and ecosystem that brings clinicians, older adults, and the government to be all in one area. I use this slide to show you 3 older adults, and those 3 older adults are the same age. However, you can see that they are functionally different. One of them is totally independent, robust. The second is using a walker. The third is using a cane. So there is something that we cannot just use the numbers and say all older adults, everybody above the age of 65. There is a rate of aging that differs from one individual to the next that makes it more important to understand the functional and cognitive status of older adults than to try to target a whole category that they are all above 60 or above 70 or above 80. And when we built this slide, we used this for our grant application for the AITC, but it was in the sense of, okay, so by development of new medicines and development of new ways to increase lifespan of older adults, now we have gained a lot of success in maintaining life, in increasing lifespan in older adults. We have a lot of older adults now living to above the 80s and 90s, but with that came challenges that we're calling here opportunities. And at the same time, there was an explosion of new engineering technologies that we at the AITC and the Engineering Healthcare Alliance try to build that capillary network to allow flow from the red side to the blue side, from the arterial side to the venous side, and exchange of oxygen and nutrients to help serve the older adults. And you can see on the opportunities side, as we age, we experience more issues with incontinence, physical weakness. Falls is a real thing that happens to older adults, and fear of falling is one of the most challenging issues to deal with once an older adult falls. So this is why a lot of people are working on predicting falls before it happens, because once it happens or you break a bone through falling, it becomes really difficult to fix that issue. Chronic wounds, if you have seen healing on a decupitous ulcer, very slow, and it's affected by a lot of the biological mechanisms that I'll be sharing with you in a minute. Medication management and polypharmacy. I have actually a picture of my students and interns on one patient that was admitted and brought with her 4 IKEA bags. I'm not kidding here, 4 IKEA bags full of medications that she is or supposed to be on by different providers. So I have the picture of the intern sitting on the floor and spreading all the bottles and trying to write a list of what she was supposed to take or what she's not supposed to take. Multimorbidity, diabetes, hypertension, heart failure. There are certain morbidities that come together that impact physical and cognitive function older adults, transitions of care, lifestyle barrier. Social isolation is becoming more and more important, and we have been seeing a lot of emphasis on that, especially with the newly published paper showing equating social isolation with smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Older adults are at a higher risk of social isolation, and COVID showed and worsened the impact of social isolation on older adults. Of course, the cognitive domains, delirium, cognitive frailty, and dementia are really important. And our goal is to match it with new technologies that come from the engineering side, whether it's robotics, sensors, wearables, big data analysis to predict outcomes. And the barriers that makes this difficult to implement is that we live in silos. Engineers live in one area, clinicians live in another, and then there are the end users, older adults, and we don't often design technology for older adults, but we actually take an existing technology and retrofit it for older adults. So it is important for us to, before we even start the process of designing technology, to plan it with key stakeholders engagement in the design process. Unrealistic expectations. Clinician thinks engineers are magicians, And sometimes making sure that we set our expectations right helps us to achieve a solution for those issues. Unpractical AI technologies. There are technologies that allows you to do things that, while fascinating and breakthrough scientifically, but on the clinical world are not relevant. It doesn't help. I use this picture also to highlight what all older adults want. This is a picture of Queen Elizabeth on a few days before she passed, and meeting Liz Truss, the Prime Minister of England. And you can see on the way the Queen is standing. This is what every older adults want to prevent, to have, which is high energy level, good health, live independently, clear thinking, and enjoyable social contacts and meaningful activities. So I'll shift a little bit to the focus of the talk today, which is one of the biological systems that affect older adults, both physically and cognitively. And this system is the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. And this system was discovered almost 125 years ago in Karolinska Institute, and by a gentleman called Tigerstadt, who back then was able to purify a protein that he discovered that if he injects that protein back into bunnies, they develop high blood pressure. And that was renin, the first element of the renin-angiotensin system, the first member of the renin-angiotensin system. And it teaches you something about clinicians. So it has been almost 125 years. Until this day, clinicians, when they think about the renin-angiotensin system, they only think that it's a system for blood pressure and volume control, fluid balance. Through the 125 years, we started knowing that there are multiple members, and I'll provide you with a little bit more detailed description of the system itself. It starts with angiotensinogen, goes to angiotensin, and it gets converted by renin into angiotensin 1, then angiotensin 2. That part of the function of the system is to control fluid balance and to control blood pressure. However, in the past 125 years also, we identified that there is much more to the system, and that there are local angiotensin systems in each of our organs. And when I say local, that means that the brain, for example, has every component of the renin-angiotensin system that allows it to be shielded from the systemic circulation. And it's interesting that a lot of the work that describes the angiotensin system is actually coming from Hopkins. So a lot of work has been done, and I'll show some slides, but from Dr. Sevil Yasser's group, showing the impact of the renin-angiotensin system on dementia and neurodegenerative disorders, and that using some of the drugs that blocks the angiotensin system protects from dementia even at equal blood pressure. Heart, there is a large group working on Marfan syndrome and congestive heart failure and post-MI remodeling, lungs and COPD and lung injury. Similarly, liver, kidney, immune system, muscle, and frailty. Why am I showing you this? It will become clear in a minute, but I wanted just to show that each of the organs have their own angiotensin system that somehow is linked to one of the age-related disorders that comes to older adults, whether it's the lung damage and lung injury with COPD, frailty, wound repair, Marfan syndrome, congestive heart failure, and MI, dementia, and neurodegenerative disorder. Became more relevant when we identified that the angiotensin system is not only present at organ level, but also inside the power plant of the cell. So what you're looking at here is a mitochondria. And if you don't know or remember anything about mitochondria, all what I want you to remember is that this is the source of energy in the body. And without energy, everything falls apart. So what you're looking at is the electron microscope is an electron microscope image of a mitochondria at the maximum resolution of the electron microscope. And in order to identify proteins on electron microscope, you have to label them with gold. So the large dots are 12 nanometer gold, and the little dots are 6 nanometer gold. We're using the large gold to label the angiotensin type 2 receptor, and the little gold to label the hormone that binds to it. And if you look through the image, you can see that it's not randomly scattered, but that every receptor has a hormone waiting to bind or bound to it, which is interesting because now you are moving from a system that controls blood pressure to a system that's present in every organ to a system that's present in the source of energy inside the cell. So part of the machinery to produce energy. I'm a clinician, so I'll show you two cases and I will use those to illustrate the interesting fact about the angiotensin system, that it controls function, but also I'll use it to illustrate what matters most to older adults. So I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, and if you have seen the ice bucket challenge, it is something that is very common. So it's one of the most common diseases, degenerative diseases of the motor neuron system. Still unknown cause, although there are some theories, and it involves upper and lower motor neurons. It starts as a weakness in an arm or a leg, and slowly through the next few years, patients usually will have total paralysis, and they will end up on the ventilator with time to death on average 3 years after the onset of focal weakness. It's a disease that is terrible, but also unpredictable in the sense of how fast it progresses. Our patient today is a 61-year-old lady that was diagnosed with ALS in 2006, and she had also some syndrome that affects sodium and potassium. Disease progressed really quickly in her case, that she ended up on the ventilator and dependent on a ventilator in a year. And when in 2-3 years later, we were measuring her sodium and potassium, it was out of whack. So we measured some of the hormones and started her on one of the blockers for the angiotensin system called spironolactone. Shortly, she started telling us that she felt stronger and she had no progression of her ALS noted for many months. And this was not something unusual, because a lot of those neurodegenerative disorders, you get a good day and bad day. And we always try to encourage patients and to cheer them up and tell them that, this is a good day, let's keep it going, let's enjoy the good days, but not to try to make a big deal out of it, because that it's the curve is usually going up and down with a general trajectory of decline. Except that when she was evaluated by physical therapists, they came to us and said that she actually was having some strength return to some of her muscles in the shoulders and the legs, and minimal return in some of her flexors. So there's something was coming back for one reason or the other. What was interesting also is that when we started looking at some, because she was on a drug that blocks the angiotensin system, we started looking at a new autoantibody that activates the angiotensin system in her, and we found that she has a slightly higher level of those autoantibodies that turn the system on. So it would make more sense that you block with a blocker to block the angiotensin system. So, driven by the apparent benefits of one of the drugs, which was spironolactone, we started adding another drug called losartan, and with the hope that the dual blockade will even get us more benefit. We started seeing improvement in her respiratory function, and patient was actually becoming ventilator free with continued evidence of improvement, which was an interesting and a bit unusual to get off the ventilator after years on the ventilator. And because, you know, this is a case of an N of 1, we continued to monitor her, and unfortunately, she developed pneumonia, aspiration pneumonia. And because with infections, lung infections, you have lower blood pressure, we had to take her off the blood pressure medication that's called losartan. That was the second angiotensin blocker that's there. And we thought that this is a good opportunity to see if it was more of just, encouragement and respiratory therapy and all of that, if we can get her without the losartan to go back off the ventilator. So when she got the infection, the pneumonia, she went back on the ventilator again. And we had to take her off the blood pressure medicine, losartan. And we tried everything to get her off the ventilator without starting losartan. Until we started losartan, we couldn't get much improvement in her NIFs. And I have a second patient that I want the patient to tell you the story themselves.
I want to let people know that it has hit them.
Before we came here, the people doesn't know what to do with this disease. This is the very first time we heard about that disease in Qatar. Firstly, they just did that EMG test, and they said it might be ALS. And the very first time on that day, I heard that the name of ALS. What is it? What is it? Then they said that go for another test after 2-3 months. Then you go to the Hamad hospital there in Qatar, and there is Dr. Javed. He's also a Pakistani doctor. He's a neurologist. He did that test, repeat that test again, and then he confirmed that this is ALS. But on that time, he said that the way he, talked to us, or the way he, what do I say? They said that this is the end of your life. Now, do all whatever you can do, or make your major decisions, and that was the time we are not prepared for that. And
Came to an outpatient consultation, and he was in such bad shape that he needed hospital. And he was bedbound for how many weeks was he basically in bed?
Short of breath. He cannot breathe even. He cannot stand for like 2-3 minutes. After that, he just leaned down in front.
So he came for an outpatient consultation and found himself immediately admitted to the intensive care unit. Is that what happened?
Yes. After that, they sent us here. They suggested that baby who is one of the best rehabilitation scientists, so you can go there. And when we came here, things improved. And day by day, slowly and gradually, things improved. And now he's walking around. He can eat. He can, talk properly. Before that, he cannot swallow even. Before that, they started the pureed food because he cannot swallow. And now he's taking the normal food.
And he's flying back to Lahore
Yeah, on
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Back home.
Yes.
And one sentence which I want to say, it is all the efforts of. I used to get tired very quick.
Before that, I just tried very
Even 2 rooms walk one way, I used to get tired.
And what about now?
Now I can walk any distance.
Yeah, he'll go by radio to the airport, and we have backup equipment for him to take back and visit him.
He's on wean actually. He's 16 to 18 hours now. He, the whole day long he's not on vent. Only in the night time, when he's sleeping, only that time he needs the ventilator. Otherwise, he's off all the time.
If we were to keep him here, we'd probably go for 12-hour week. I didn't want to stress him before the flight back.
Yeah, that is the only reason. Otherwise, he can make
He
it.
gets home
So the patient actually picked this song, and I'm using this to illustrate a message. He wanted to show how much he's able to do and to also tell us how he feels.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here. You can take a break. I'm a hot air balloon that could go to space with the air, like I don't care, baby. By the way, because I'm happy.
So I just wanted to use this video for a couple of reasons. First, and I want, before you think that I'm selling snake oil here, I want to tell you that we have not discovered a treatment for ALS, and that this adjustment for angiotensin system blockers helped in few select patients that have some certain criteria with them. And if we go back to actually, this tells you that this is not a cure, because if you look at the time that the patient was on losartan, she was ventilator free, and then take her off losartan, she went back in. So that it's not like you created a new lung or developed new cells or anything like that. This is more fundamental mechanism, because it sounds like more like a coffee effect or caffeine effect, a buzz of energy that went through and helped. And when you stop it, it goes away. So something to keep in our minds as we think through this. Second, very important thing. This gentleman got up and danced and selected a song to say, I'm happy, knowing that we have not cured ALS in him. But what mattered most to him was the ability to walk, to breathe, to move between rooms, and to be able to do things that are important for him physically and cognitively. So when we design or think about new things for older adults, physical and cognitive function, regardless of the disease, is going to be the most important item to focus on. And with that, again, back to the idea that there is a need, as you can see, by 2050, in some parts of the world, 1 out of 3 to 1 out of 4 of all adults will be above the age of 65. And there is this sweet period that you can catch the preclinical changes before it progresses. So you can see on this curve, this is a very nice curve that shows cognitive and physical function, and how there is normal function, and then older adults will separate into two groups, with normal aging, healthy aging, and then there is a group that will separate into frailty, disability, and dementia. And there's this period in between that you start to see the separation that would be the most important area to catch early on, so that you can focus your intervention. There is a time that you can change things, but once you lose the muscles, once you lose brain cells, it's hard to implement effective intervention strategies. And identifying those preclinical biomarkers, whether they are in the molecular level or digital level, is going to be really important. So in the clinical world, we focus a lot on the biomarkers of frailty, of cognitive decline, and trying to identify elevations that will focus our effort in this group that needs to be focused on. There are also a lot of digital biosignals that can allow us, if we work together, to identify it way before our older adults progress in one of the trajectories. Hallmarks of aging. Everybody ages. So this is a famous review from Cell that was updated in 2023, and shows that everybody has some elements of those changes that happens with aging, whether it's the nutrient sensing, the mitochondrial dysfunction. Mitochondria is the energy, cellular senescence and proliferation of cells. Chronic inflammation is a big item, genomic instability and telomere attrition, epigenetic changes, Everybody ages with changes in those systems. However, as I mentioned, there are elements that you start to see in our frail older adults, that building up of cyto and neurotoxic metabolites like the kynurenine and tryptophan, depletion of energy metabolites, damage to the mitochondria, muscle wasting and atrophy, and changes in energy metabolites, including lipid metabolism in older adults, are all part of the changes that we try to identify early on as we age. Frailty is a consequence of this decrease in resources and increased damage in older adults. And I'll provide a slide in a few minutes that talks about that balance between repair and damage. So it's a state of increased vulnerability to stressors due to age-related decline in physiologic reserve across neuromuscular, metabolic, and immune system. So frailty is that condition that pushes older adults to age before their time. And it's not synonymous with aging. So not all older adults are going to be frail, but there is this subgroup of older adults that comprise 10 to 15% that will be frail. And a fun fact here is that frailty was first described at Hopkins with Drs. Linda Fried and Jeremy Walston that identified 5 elements that that constitute the diagnosis of frailty syndrome in older adults, including grip strength, walking speed, energy, exhaustion, and weight loss. Something that pushes those older adults to age before their time. And I wanted to share with you this figure from a paper that we just published in Nature Aging, a review paper that describes the intersect between cognitive and physical function in a syndrome called cognitive frailty. And cognitive frailty is a newer concept that is dual diagnosis. Older adults that age physically and cognitively, so they have frailty and also cognitive impairment that is not Alzheimer's dementia. So there is a certain pattern in their cognitive function that is more linked to physical frailty. And in this figure, we try to say that there is a battery in the middle, and that battery drives both physical and cognitive status. And then the naive thinking that there is a group that will be totally aging on one side but not everything else is just the result of working in silos. People that work in the brain are different than people that work in muscles, but that there are central fundamental mechanisms that are damaged by chronic inflammation, neurodegeneration, oxidative stress, and that are affected by psychosocial factors, biological factors, and environmental factors to keep adding to the damage, including loneliness, social isolation, depression, and anxiety, stress, life traumas, and all the biological factors that we just discussed, including also environmental factors, sleep and sleep quality, a big deal in older adults, life space limitations, pollution, air, noise, pesticide pollution, and access to resources for older adults. That all feeds into building the damage, and as you can see, it drives the pointer from being robust to pre-frail to frail, and also affects the cognitive status of older adults. And in this figure, we tried to illustrate that in a way that balances the capacity of the battery that you start with the accumulating damage. So some people will accumulate damage more quickly and exhaust resources more quickly and end up with early mortality in the second and third examples, while some people will maintain the capacity of the battery and build up the damage at a slower rate and have a longer lifespan and health span also. Frail individuals have the highest risk for adverse outcomes. Why does it matter? Why do we need to know that? Because those individuals are the most sensitive to adverse outcomes. Anything that happens to them will be always complicated. So two older adults, one frail, one not frail, get infected with COVID. The frail person will always have worse outcomes most of the time. Not to use the word always. They have also the highest risk for slowest recovery and impaired tissue repair, meaning that while a robust person might be able to go home directly, a frail older adult might need to transition to a rehab facility and maybe a nursing home for a longer period before being able to go home again. Most iatrogenic complications. Iatrogenic are the things that happens, you do the right thing and something wrong goes on there. Whether it's the, for example, you start them on antibiotics, they develop an infection because of the antibiotics, like C. diff. You treat one thing, something else breaks. So it is important to identify frail older individuals, but even more important than that is to identify the ability, physical and functional abilities, and biomarkers that helps us to identify those older adults before they proceed directly into full frailty. This is a cycle of frailty as described initially by Dr. Linda Fried and Jeremy Walston. And you can see that this is a vicious cycle that starts in one area, whether it's the energy, and you'll see a lot of energy signatures there, right? So resting metabolic rate, decreased total energy expenditure, chronic undernutrition, wasting of muscles, sarcopenia, decreased stress and power. So it doesn't really matter where you start. Once it starts, you will just keep going in that vicious cycle that ends up with falls energies, hospitalization, dependency, and being in a nursing home. So best is to identify early on and identify them and put them on a more intervention that helps. This is an article that we reviewed what are the important domains that contributes to a new phenomenon called resilience. And before I confuse you, resilience is a new exciting area of interest in older adults. Resilience is the ability to respond to stressors. And while frailty is more of a static condition, or by definition is a concept that looks at your ability to for grip strength or walking speed, exhaustion, weight loss. But resilience is actually involves the item of triggering a stressor and then getting a response to that stressor. We in that we started to identify that the word resilience, it's important for us to connect the three domains: physical domain, cognitive domain, and psychosocial domain. And that stressors can come in any of those domains. So for example, you can have a physical stressor like a hip fracture, but that the impact, the perturbation of domains would be psychosocial effect, more depression, or a cognitive effect. Patient become more delirious. So with that, we tried to build a new concept in aging that uses all the three domains, and that resilience is something in the middle that impacts the physiologic systems that connects all the physical, cognitive, and psychosocial domains. Nothing more exciting nowadays as the wearables. Everybody is trying to design a new wearable that allows us to measure one or more of the functions. You can see the Fitbit, Alexa monitors movements at home, the eyeglasses that can monitor your pupillary action, eye movements, the the watches, including Apple Watch, the Soul sensors, the socks, and I'll borrow from Professor Shilapa's words, is that we are running out of body for all of those wearables to put on, but those technologies are exciting ways to keep track on all the different domains, the physical, the cognitive, the psychosocial domain. But the important part here is how can we harness all the data that will become available from all those wearables and put it in a clinically relevant and importantly in something that can help older adults stay more functional, stay more independent, and help them to stay at home longer. When we put the AITC together, our theme were to put nursing homes out of business with the goal that we will be working together as engineers and clinicians to develop new technologies to maintain independence in our older adults, both physical and cognitive. Similar to the idea of redwood trees. Redwood trees, they are never alone. So you will never see a giant redwood tree standing alone. Those red trees usually come in clusters and they provide support to each other. So this is what happens when you bring engineering, clinical medicine, physician, nurses, therapists, business specialists, and policy, and bring them all together to work together to build something for older adults. So that's the same metaphor that redwood trees provide strength and support to each other. So I'll just end with a few slides on the Johns Hopkins Human Aging Project, and that our mission is to seek, discover, and apply innovative biological and engineering solutions to conditions of aging that promote healthy, dignified, joyful aging for all. And we have partners from the School of Engineering, School of Nursing, Carey Business School, School of Medicine, and Bloomberg School of Public Health, all working together at the service of older adults. And the Human Aging Project, part of it is the Artificial Intelligence and Technology Collaboratory, and I'm just using this as a way to show the breadth of centers and programs that fall under the Human Aging Project umbrella, including the Gerotech Incubators Program for students from the engineering school, medical school, and business school. We have our Fellows Training Program, the Older American Independence Center that focuses on frailty, the Human Aging Project Scholars, and Biology of Healthy Aging program. And we have multiple initiatives and that brings those centers together. I want to tell you quickly about our AITC because I think that's important for the audience of the webinar. We are one of three centers. Penn and UMass Consortium are the other two centers. We focus on populations, including our registry of older adults. We have a registry of close to 900 community dwelling older adults that have been characterized in terms of physical function, frailty specifically, with some elements of cognitive assessment as well that that live around the area in Baltimore. Myself, Dr. Alexis Battle, Dr. Remy Walston, Dr. Rama Shalapa, and an amazing army of clinicians, business specialists, engineers working together to direct this AITC. And I want to give a little bit of details on our first round. So we are a center that funds development of new technology for older adults. And in our first 3 years, we have received 494 applications for new technologies for older adults, which is something that we are definitely very proud of, that there are startups and academia and companies that want to put new technologies in the service of older adults, and that a lot of them came up from outside of the AITC, and that we funded 60 of them through the past 3 years. I'm going to show you a little bit of the break of the centers. So you can see some from Johns Hopkins, academia, and company, startup companies make 30% of the total pool of applicants. And this shows that the companies and startups were, almost 42% toward academia and 57% toward startup companies, and that a little bit over 45% were from female PIs or leaders of the startup companies. A little bit of the distribution of the awardees from around the US and what they focused on. So you can see the areas that we funded so far. So we funded technologies related to cognitive deficits, mobility and ADL, treatment and management of care. Those are areas that are of interest to the center. I just wanted to provide this slide to show what the centers are interested in and what technologies we funded so far: robotics, user-facing software and platforms, wearables, of course, smart household devices and utilities, diagnostics, working on diagnostics, treatment and care, prevention, and research elements. We have 2 cores that will fund the pilots, and those 2 cores, one of them is focused on Alzheimer's disease and related dementia, and those are the elements that they look for when they consider the applications that they receive. And this is the 2nd core, which is physical aging, so independence physically and maintaining independence in older adults. And those slides we will be able to share with you so that you can see what are the items, areas, domains that are interesting and that we are interested in funding in our AITC. This is an important slide that I want to share with you so that you can see how we start the process of putting the RFA out. So we have our stakeholder engagement core, and that we have been getting a lot of input from key stakeholders, and we made a list out of that. Then there is a technology identification and training core that identifies new technologies. We put them together in an RFA, so we send requests for proposals 2 times a year. And when we receive, the first step is to submit a letter of intent. When we receive the letter of intent, it gets reviewed by a clinician and an engineer, and it gets scored, and highly scored concept proposals will get invited to submit a full application. Once we receive the full application, it goes through an external review and it gets scored. So out of that, there are 2 possibilities. Some of the application will have really interesting idea that we feel strongly about, that we would invite to be incubated in our clinical translation and validation core. So this is more of a core that will take maybe a premature idea or a technology that requires some adjustment before making it competitive for real world piloting. And we work with the applicants to make it better, providing engineering and clinical and maybe some funding also to do some feasibility testing in older adults. And the other possibility, so if the idea is great but not there yet, then we go to clinical translation and validation. If the idea is ready for piloting, then it goes through the funding mechanism to get pilots, and our funding levels is around $200,000 in direct expenses. We have funded many startups and companies that we're really proud of, and maybe next time we'll be able to invite some of the awardees to tell us about their innovation in aging. And this is just a slide to show how this is all connected together. And in the middle is the AITC with the clinical geriatrics or artificial intelligence connected to the Older American Dependence Group Center, and we have mentorship programs and our biology of healthy aging, all together building an ecosystem of scientists and engineers and business specialists. We help at all different elements. And I want to end with this slide that says, no one can whistle a symphony. It takes a whole orchestra to play it. And with that, I'll end, and thank you, everybody.
Dr. Abadir, we do have a few questions that have come in.
Okay.
So one of the questions, are the letters of intent scored with the same rubric as NIH uses? This is, I'm sure about the, yeah, I'm sure.
The same rubric as the NIH uses. No, we have our own elements that is tailored from the NIH, but more abbreviated and more simple, because in the letter of intent, it is not expected that they will be able to cover every element in the NIH scoring innovation, etc., etc., etc.
Another question, angiotensin antibodies are found in a subset of MECFS and dysautonomia patients. Have you observed this in your research?
So Nita, this is a great question. I have not observed in my own research, but I'm not surprised with that. Those angiotensin autoantibodies are, as you know, are antibodies that bind to the subtype 1 receptor, and they drive a lot of the functions of the AT1 receptor, which is inflammation, oxidative stress, higher blood pressure. And it's interesting when you start thinking about it in the context of COVID also, because those are the elements that we saw in the worst of patients with COVID. So I have not observed that in my research, but would love to talk with you and see if this is an area that we can explore together.
And Dr. Abadir, you can probably see under the answered column, there's a few more questions that have not been answered. I've just told them that we would hold until this point.
Yes, so I tried to talk about the mitochondrial renin-angiotensin system, but acknowledging that the audiences will come from engineering and clinical, I tried to provide a more abbreviated talk about the mitochondria and the renin-angiotensin system. I'm happy to discuss more, but I did not want people to be bored with all the details of the angiotensin system. I actually have a few slides more, but I tried just to make it a very abbreviated one. Have you tried to tack cortisol in the mitochondria along with the others? I don't, Cheryl, we have not done that, and that would be interesting to look at, definitely. What?
And Fabio has a question about the studies showing that acting on the tissue local RAS pathway can delay aging even without affecting the systemic blood pressure.
So I'll answer Cheryl. Cheryl, I think we should talk, because I am truly interested in POTS, and I think it is very common. I know that Hopkins has one of the very, very few POTS clinics in the US, and I do think that there is an area of interest there, looking at not just the angiotensin system, but the angiotensin adrenergic crosstalk in those individuals, and would be wonderful to meet and discuss the possibilities of the different angiotensin autoantibodies, not just the AT1 autoantibody. Okay, so Fabio, I have a few slides. Can you guys still see my slides?
Yes.
So this paper looks at angiotensin converting enzymes in ALS. So I was using this paper to say that what we observed was not something that's unique in our hands, but that other people have observed in a large, fairly large control, but only 729 patients newly diagnosed with ALS, that there was a dose-dependent inverse association between ACE inhibitors and the risk of developing ALS. And this is Marfan syndrome. So this is from Dr. Hal Dietz's group, and showing the impact of angiotensin receptor blockers on aortic root dilatation. Very famous paper. This is a paper that we published in Science Translational Medicine a while ago, looking at the injection of cardiotoxin into the muscles. And you can see how cardiotoxin damages the muscles in the control mice, but mice treated with losartan look at the pattern of healing that does not have the fibrotic part. And the last thing is this exercise that shows that the synergistic effect between exercise and ACE inhibitors. So if you are using ACE inhibitors and exercise, you maintain your walking speed. And this is a clinical study in older ladies that combines both exercise and ACE inhibitors. And I'll be happy to provide the references on the slides. Dementia protection, this is from a neurology article by Dr. Sevil Yasser and her group that shows ARBs and ACE inhibitors use as associated with 40% to 50% decreased risk of developing AD dementia. And lastly, this is the paper on lung damage. So you can see in room air, airways, looking at chronic smoke, and then chronic smoke plus losartan. So you can see how it protected against the damage. So this was basically my attempts at showing different impacts that connects different systems and organs when you use angiotensin receptor blockers. And I think we are out of time. Please email me any questions. I'll be more than happy to meet and discuss or send you any of the references in the paper. And Randall, we don't know exactly, but I will tell you one thing is that if you look at rickettsia, you will be surprised with the presence of angiotensin parts in the parent bacteria that evolved to become our own mitochondria at this time. So happy to meet Randall, and we can discuss this further. Thank you, everybody.